Explorer, you've arrived at the threshold of an epic journey where self-love meets fitness. Gather your courage as we seek to challenge the limits of our bodies, become mentally resilient, and learn to cherish ourselves for the beautiful individuals we are. Along the way, we'll be joined by incredible mentors in the pole and fitness community who will share their wealth of knowledge to help you blossom. This is the Pole Adventures podcast, and your adventure starts now. Welcome, explorers, to another episode of Pole Adventures. I'm your host, Paris, an eternally struggling pole dancer, here to bring you the wisdom of Deb Roach. Deb is the owner of Stargazer Studios, a 3-time international pole champion, and has since toured the world judging, performing, and teaching fellow pole dancers. And she has done all this despite being born without most of her left arm. So there is really no one better to teach us about confidence amidst comparison. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for doing such good research in your intro. That's awesome.
So I'd love for you to tell us a bit about your pole adventure. Like, what was your why for pole?
Okay, it's my why for pole. So I was DJing and stage dancing in goth nightclubs in the early noughties. I had dark green hair at the time. It was a brand Fudge Mr. Green jeans I used to use. And I had that hair color for over a decade. And I was stage dancing and DJing in a club one night when Susie Q and Missy did a doubles pole act. Now, I lived in a place called Petersham at the time, so we had the Oxford Tavern just up the road. And so I'd seen stripping, like Amber Ray worked there. There were like lots of amazing polers that worked in this strip club, and I loved them and I thought they were fantastic. But what Missy and Susie did, I was obsessed with circus at the time. And they gave a real circus quality to pole. So their performance was the story of 2 marionette puppets that broke free of their strings.
Nice.
And it just blew my mind. The stripy socks and the pigtails. I'd not really thought about the theatre, the theatrics, and the possibilities of pole beyond the context in which I already had seen it and was familiar with it. And I also thought that being disabled, it was not something that I would ever be able to do, like circus or pole or anything, apart from stage dancing in my very unique, niche, industrial Gothic club scene. I just didn't figure that fitting in was not something that was for me, and I'd become pretty comfortable with that and confident in the circle that I was traveling in. So I was backstage and I was complimenting Missy and Susie and telling them how they had completely blown my mind, and I was just not expecting what I'd seen, and, you know, it completely changed my perception about what pole could be and what it was, and it meant that I was able to take down the rules and see that this is a form of open expression of all kinds. And I just really loved it. I said, you know, you're lucky girls with your 2 arms and your ability to look so strong and powerful and graceful and sexy and tell these amazing stories. I'd love to be able to do that. Meaning it's such a shame that I have 1 arm and I can't. But Susie turned around immediately and said, well, it's about time you gave it a go. You know, you should come in and try. And so I went in. So they were team teaching together. Missy was learning to become an instructor back then in 2007 from Susie. And, I was in love from the first lesson. Susie gave me a lot of attention and support, and meant that I felt safe trying a lot of things. Like, I was in a cross-leg layback in my very first class because I was body aware and strong, and I didn't know that I could be talented at this, or that I had these talents. I'd done some adult dance classes for my own mental well-being because I really liked dance as a kid, so I went to just beginners classes at Sydney Dance Company, and I made some nice friends that way, but I was still the goth girl in the room kind of thing. And it was amazing. And it was all body types, like all women supporting each other, and everyone found it really hard. It wasn't just me that found it hard because I was different. everyone found it hard.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no matter what sport you come from or whatever.
Yeah, there was something like some people find, like, whereas I was confident in the dance and the burlesque and the sensual parts of pole, and I was really working for the strength bits. Other people were like, yeah, I can do the strong thing, but felt like Bambi in stilettos, felt like they were absolutely out of their comfort zones trying to dance and move gracefully. So it was really interesting. I was like, okay, this really is for everyone. Someone will find something challenging, and there is something still accessible about it. And I was hooked. So that's what I loved about it. That's what got me into it. And then I started doing a couple of classes a week, and I didn't know at the time that I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So every time I try and do these big Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a hypermobility disorder. So my connective tissues and my collagen are they don't behave in the expected way. So my body is hypermobile. So it's not flexible in a way that's strong. It's flexible in the joints are very loose and unsupported. And so my ligaments and my tendons are a little bit like jellyfish rather than supporting nets. And so I got quite a few injuries, but they taught me a lot about my body. And I studied to become a personal trainer and group fitness instructor and a strength and conditioning coach, and did functional movement analysis because I wanted to understand bodies. If I could understand most bodies and how things worked, then maybe I could figure out my own body and why things weren't working the same way as they did for everyone else. And I really liked the challenge, and I was really inspired and motivated to keep going. It was the first time, I think, in my life that I'd found reasons rather than excuses. And pole always gave me a reason rather than an excuse. And sorry, I'm just hearing some people out in the streets honk their horns. It's probably very disruptive for the podcast. So I was really hooked, and I loved it, and I loved learning things about my body. But then, in 2009, I'd gone up I'd learned to climb, I'd learned to invert, but I was now training with Jamila because Susie Q had opened her own studio far away from Petersham. And I couldn't do the signature move. I couldn't do the Jamila. And I repeated the class and the term 3 times. And I couldn't progress because I couldn't do the move that you needed to do to progress to the next level.
Yeah.
That was pretty heartbreaking. I just went to stretch classes and handstands classes, and I still wanted to be connected to the community, and people still said very encouraging things about me exploring pole in other ways. But it kind of sucked that the class environment wasn't something I was able to be a part of after a certain point, not in the traditional Australian context anyway.
Was that forever, or were you able to move past it eventually?
Look, some people, like, studios opened their I have learnt to Jamila, but it was in 2014, so it was 5 years later. I was able to pole, like, in different contexts. Like, I go to practice time at Bobby's, and then Achieve Studio would let us go and train there. And sometimes we'd go to Jennifer's studio in Surrey Hills. And, people would open their spaces for me and friends to go and hang out and jam and try things. But, I couldn't continue in the class environment.
So did you find, like, a unique way to compensate or to get into those moves that?
Yeah, absolutely. And certain instructors are really interested in figuring things out. Like Susie and Missy were amazing. They were always really interested in figuring things out. Bailey Hart helped me enormously preparing for my first international pole championship. She was so up for just trying new things and exploring what was possible for me. And I really, like, those were formative experiences for me in pole, that people were able to take the time to help me break down movement, to understand how to adapt it so that I could access it. And and Bendy Kate I was really lucky. She was really good at it, and I got the Accessible Arts New South Wales. I got a $10,000 grant to go over and do 3 months of intensive training with her in the UK, which was super duper awesome. But that's when a lot of other things that I was holding on to came to light. So I wasn't automatically confident and happy and easygoing and easy to get along with at that time. It really came out like that I wasn't always bringing a good attitude to class. Like Bendy had to really coach me on showing up without feeling like I was already a failure before I started, and showing up ready to try things on. So I wasn't the person I am today.
I think I really struggle with that too.
Yeah. So
do you have any tips with that?
Pardon?
Do you have any tips to
exactly what she said to me, which was like, every day is going to be different. You need to get out of your head what you expect yourself to be able to do and show up willing to find out what's in the tank. Like, you need to just show up in the room ready to see what there is, rather than expecting what you'll get. It's not about what you'll get out of the session. It's not about how hard it's going to be. Like, we just have to try and breathe into being open to whatever we're going to experience that day without worrying about how last session was and all the feelings that we're still holding from last session. We need to let that live in the past and be in our present. And I think yoga has helped me a lot with being much better with that. So just, showing up without, and learning to be able to turn that negative voice in my head off. And that just takes practice. You need to develop a positive voice in your own head to tell it to shut up, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have, the devil has been given too much. Well, in my case, definitely the devil on my shoulder that was like, you're stupid, you're weak, you're going to hurt yourself if you do this again. You need to give the angel the voice to say, but what if I do it? But what if I succeed? What if it's fun? God, heaven forbid I have a good time. It's something that you have to choose for yourself to stop, to get out of your own way.
Yeah. And, when we were still in that class environment, especially in my experience, that comparison monster is just always there. It's like, oh, they're all doing this is, even though I know that they're not judging me, they don't even care. They're doing their own thing. No one's looking at me. They're worried about themselves. Do you have any, tips for combating that?
If it's coming up for us, it's about our own growth journey. It's our personal work. It's our shadow work to be able to hold space for who we are and to know that we're enough. And that's having those experiences in the pole room are an indicator that we need to do that deep work, that shadow work to show up.
What is shadow work?
It's looking at our darker sides and accepting that there's something going on with us that we need to address. So it's stuff that we don't just talk about in everyday conversation. It's not the stuff that we do in the light. So it's like, so it's stuff that we do in the shadows. It's seeing the therapist and saying, this is the way that I feel about myself in these situations. What can we do so that I'm comfortable? What can make me comfortable? What could I try to make me comfortable? And the answer is different for every person, because you have to figure out why it is that you're uncomfortable before you can figure out how to feel comfortable. So
did you move to training at home or one-on-ones?
Both of those things, yes, and jamming with friends. I was very reluctant to do a lot of one-on-ones because the system failed me. It wasn't something that I'd chosen for myself. It was, I couldn't progress, and my only option was to book private lessons, which, as you know, are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Classes are affordable. Private lessons are not.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't think that anyone else's experience was valuable or that their time was valuable. That wasn't the case. The case was that I was an athlete and myself, and that I was not made of money, and I was still trying to build a career, and I couldn't afford private instruction. So I didn't want to ask for something for nothing, but I also didn't want to feel excluded from something I was really passionate about and really wanted to do well in, and really was just really driven by. And I think we all know what it's like when we try pole and we get obsessed and we're hooked. But then, for every moment that we love, it brings out a lot of our demons and stuff as well. There's a bit of ego game in there. So, yeah, it's hard learning to get out of our own head and to just show up and be open and to experience the movement and to breathe into the feeling of what you're doing rather than into what you're thinking. But it's doable. You just have to really want it.
And that's interesting, because not everyone can afford, private lessons, and maybe not everyone wants to even go to the studio with classes. How did you learn then? Like, what would you recommend for people who maybe can't afford to go to class but still really want to learn pole?
I mean, I would recommend PoleSphere. I think that's a great place, a great resource to learn pole from amazing instructors in your own home if that's what you want to do. But yeah, different things will fit different people. For me, learning pole, it was jamming with friends who taught me things they'd learn, and we just mess around until I did something similar and then put it with other things that I could do. And it was exploration, and which we do a lot in the dance world. You'll get paid to do research in the dance world, in Kentucky. I've worked in dance over in the UK and in circus, and you do research and development weeks where you get to just explore what's capable with the apparatus or with the room and the space or the theory, the idea. And that's how I learned pole, exploring what was possible and then sharing with each other, no, this is, this line doesn't look right. This is supposed to go over here. This should be extended more. This arm should be a bit higher and lower. So that was how I spent 5 years there. But I was still able to do some choreo classes and chair and handstand workshops and some floor work stuff. So my progress didn't stop. It just took a different direction. I just wasn't very happy about the fact that it wasn't a direction I had any say in. So I think what other people, they can just try what fits. If you want to do home pole lessons, do PoleSphere. If you want to go to a studio and fill that class and be around people, great. If you want it to be special private time for you and another instructor, that's also really awesome. Privates help you progress so fast, and it prevents that comparison journey. If I was able to afford private lessons, hell, I'd have done one every day. But yeah, that is what I did with Bendy Kate. I went over there and we did that 3-month intensive, and it was 3-hour long sessions. It was a lot.
And what about safety? In general, did you find yourself holding yourself back from the crazier moves because you're worried at all?
I am a kamikaze. I am not very concerned. I know my body and I trust myself, and often I trust myself too much.
Okay, so other way around.
Yeah. So the other day, I'll give it a go. If someone says that they think I can do it, I'm like, all right, let's do it. But the other day I tried a Russian kick up, so a floor work move which windmills over and then you dive back to the floor. And normally it would be your left hand that catches you first and then the right hand comes down. Obviously I don't have the left hand, but I got the skill, and I got it a few times and I was getting more and more confident with this skill. And so I really gave it some welly. Oh boy, did I give it some welly. I gave it a lot of oomph and I really had a red hot go. But not having the left arm means that I shoulder charged the floor at really high intensity. So I'm covered in bruises. And I've been to see the physio today to put my neck and my shoulder back into place. Yeah, so no, I am pretty brave. I'm not held back by fear. I figure that yes, we need to treat our bodies with respect. So I have a great team of amazing body workers, and I do try to listen to their limits. I try to listen to their limits and their guidelines, but I'm still me, and I'm going to do what makes me happy. And I find that fear and unhappiness are pretty close neighbors, and the more things I give fear control of, the less happiness I experience. So I try not to hang out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did that lack of fear ever lead to any embarrassing moments?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you have a gut feeling going, this isn't right today. I shouldn't be here. This is not what I should be doing right now. So I'd been invited over to London in 2012 to do a showcase for the World Pole Sports Championships. So I'd won my first title in March. They'd invited me over for, I think it was late June, right before the 2012 Olympics. And London was in the midst of a heat wave, and London they were using chrome poles. Now I train on brass poles.
Yeah, brass for Australia.
Yeah. And in Australia, it was also winter. So I had winter skin with no grip going to a hot climate with a sticky chrome pole. 2 of them, in fact, on a stage in front of a couple of thousand people.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What
So
happened?
I get on stage to do my routine, and I'm slipping and I'm sliding, and I just keep trying, and I actually fell out of a cross ankle release or a straight leg layback onto my head. My butt landed on my head. I herniated a couple of discs. They regenerated, which was really lucky. In my low back, they're not angry anymore, which is really good. I recovered really well, but I was not in a good way for a little while. But I kept going, and the audience all loved me because despite the fact that I'd fallen and hurt myself, I think 3 times in that routine, they stood up and they were crying and they were cheering because I just didn't stop. As much as I wanted to stop, I just didn't stop. So I made friends by being shit on stage once, and I'm still embarrassed about it every day.
Yeah, do you have any tips for the less confident, exude that not giving up to everyone else?
Like, someone's got to grit their teeth and make it through, and it changes people when that person's in the room. Like, you can just grit your teeth and go through with what you're there to do, regardless of like how it's going. And that it's resilience. It's a show of strength and determination. And being resilient, I think, is probably one of the most valuable qualities you can have in life. It means that anything can happen and you will sort it out for yourself and that you'll be okay. And honestly, there's no tips to it. You just practice doing it. You just start and you just go, right, this is a shit situation and it sucks and I'm in it. And you're really in it and you live it fully, and you don't back down. You don't blink. You stare it in the eye and you hold eye contact and you're like, yep, this is awful. And it's going to be over soon. It's not going to last forever. It's okay to be in a crappy place and keep breathing. You're not going to die. Usually you're not going to die. One time in our life it'll happen and we'll actually die. But only one time. Up until then, it'll be
just
okay.
once.
Yeah, just once.
What about loving your body and accepting what you've got in general? Did you ever struggle with that?
Yeah, 100%. I had an eating disorder from as young as 14 because I'd been a chubby kid. And I got glandular fever. I think I'll tell the full story if that's okay. So I was on a grade 5 netball team, and so I was trying to do physical activity, even though I was, netball with one hand, probably not a great decision in the first place, but it was the local community sport. It was the thing that all the other kids did. And so I wanted to do what all the other kids did. And after one season, we went to try out again and re-enroll, and they kicked me out and said, we're not having her. She's not good enough. And I was in the room for the conversation.
Oh. Was it an actual skill thing, or was it a bit more of a...
There was a skill and attitude thing because I was a bit not confident. And Yeah, so I got kicked off the netball team, but then I tried ice skating this one time and I couldn't do it. And that made me really angry. And so I demanded lessons in ice skating, and I said, I'm going to do this until I win a medal. That's, I guess, just how I am. I really suck at this, and I'm going to do it until I get a medal. So,
Did you get a medal?
yeah, I won a comp.
Oh.
Yeah, I did it until I got there. Yeah, so I was ice skating and I got glandular fever and I was chubby as an ice skater, which is, there's a very strong balletic aesthetic in figure skating and ice dance. So losing 10 kilos because I was too sick to get out of bed for 2 months was met with a whole lot of praise when I returned to the skating rink. So the lesson in that for me was, if I lose weight, people like me. If I lose weight, I'm given positive messages. If I lose weight, I get positive attention, which I've never actually had much of. So I kept on that for about 7 years, 8 years, 22. I think I started to properly recover from anorexia, and it just became eating disorder not otherwise specified. So there were time periods of bulimia. There were time periods of orthorexia, like the obsessive healthy eating and stuff, years of calorie counting. And I'm actually, since I have properly healed from this, which was only 4 to 5 years ago, I'm in better shape than I've ever been in my entire life, because I'm not depriving my body. I'm nourishing myself well.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from those source stories.
Yeah, so because my body had been so starved for so long, it went through so much stress. I was stressed, my body was stressed. It was not a happy time. And then, periods of overindulgence and overeating, it's like there's an emotional driver behind that. And I do think that that's true for almost everyone. The emotional driver that makes us go oral, to put something in the mouth, to feel that comfort from food. So I'd either go through strict deprivation and be a really hard person, or try to be a softer person and then balloon in weight from being comfortable. And learning to be healthy, it took a long time, but it was totally worth it. It was, it's been very, very valuable to know how to just live a happy life and to move my body. And it's actually, to have enough energy to do hard things that inspire you, that you get stronger at, and you grow, and you can keep doing hard things without getting injured. And that's when your body changes. It was a difficult thing to learn, but it was, again, a really vital lesson, and I'm glad that I went through it. But yeah, I've really struggled with body image, and learning to love and accept who I am. And again, I can't pinpoint the moment when I got here. It was just dedicated
journey.
Yeah, just dedicated progress towards loving the way that, like, focusing on the feeling of the things that make me happy, and what I can do to remove the things that make me unhappy. How can I combat making myself feel unhappy? Because it's me that chooses to do that. Like, it's always us that puts us in situations where we feel unhappy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So just, the big step for everyone, I think, is the radical accountability, that, like, 100% ownership, that the way that I feel, that my body issues, my self-esteem, they're my responsibility. Yes, it can be our interactions with others that have, like, really put us into dark places. And I know that there are people I could name that have put me in the hurt locker in a really big way. But it's our own job to get ourselves out. We don't need to hold on to that. We can come back from that stronger and, again, build a thicker skin and become more resilient as a result of it. And I think just practicing that, just choosing not to take life so seriously, it made a huge difference. Huge difference. Knowing that we only get one shot at this, we might as well just have fun and not worry too much, like, look after ourselves, but make it a priority and a joy rather than a chore and a problem.
Yeah, that was a huge shift for me as well. Just I'm only gonna do the things that make me happy. You just
Yeah.
cut out the things that don't, and yeah, it's been so much better. Just got to figure out how to do that with fitness. If there was just one thing that you could encourage other pole dancers to take away from all this, what would that be?
If you're always showing up and you're giving it your best shot and it's still not working for you or making you happy, it might not be you. It might be the class. It might be the studio. Try something else. Don't keep doing something that's making you feel crappy. I didn't think that there would ever be a place for me in Australia because of the level system that didn't serve me. But when I got back from the UK, there was a studio that had opened that had pole at your own pace and all levels classes, and I now own that studio. You just keep searching, keep an open mind, look for your tribe. Don't accept that the place that you're at is the place that you have to be, but also do everything you can to show up for the moment and not for your expectation of what you should be able to do.
Yeah, awesome. And I heard you had some books coming out. Would you like to let us know a bit more about it?
Oh, it's just a couple of ebooks that I've been preparing for people on this self-love journey. So we've got part 1, which is about how to figure out if you might be in a toxic relationship with yourself, and part 2, how to fix it.
The best part.
Yeah.
Where can our explorers find that and find you?
Pardon?
Where can our explorers find that? And find
there will be a link in my bio at Debzilla on Instagram.
Awesome. So make sure to go check that out, guys. And Deb, thank you so much for being our guide on confidence and comparison and everything. And thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Paris, for having me.
Well, we've reached the end of our adventure today. So until next time, remember to stay strong, keep pushing your limits, and embrace your individual journey. Don't forget to grab your free access to the Pole Adventures Compendium, a collection of incredible resources to help you progress on your pole journey. And if you enjoyed today's adventure, make sure to leave a review so other explorers can embark on the journey with us. This is the Pole Adventures podcast, and your next adventure awaits.